All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Discovering Multifamily. I'm your host, Anthony Scandariato with Red Knight Properties. And today we have a very special guest by the name of Kevin Heras. And he is one of the co-founders of Investnext. And he's here to talk to us today about what his software does and how he can help other real estate operators modernize their communication platform with their investors and essentially, streamline that process through technology, which is very, fragmented and not a lot of it exists in the commercial real estate industry right now. So, want to introduce Kevin. And prior to founding Investnext, he was the employee number 2 at a network startup called Handshake. And Handshake today is currently valued at over 400 million. And now, he's one of the co-founders of Investnext, as I mentioned. And, to date, he's managing over 230 syndications and over $1 billion in capital. So we want to hear more about his background, how he got started, and also what Investnext does and how important it is to have systems in your syndication business. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, by a little bit about my background, as you mentioned, I technology background was that's kind of my forte. My co-founder was involved in real estate, and so he himself also a technology background, but kind of two nerds getting together, seeing a pretty big problem in the space, and that is the lack of effective technology that helps syndicators, entrepreneurs raise and manage capital across their network of investors. So that was 2.5 years ago. And today, we kind of, our mission to date has been building that single platform to run all of that. So it's been pretty exciting.
That's awesome. And so could you talk to us a little bit more about what you do at Investnext now and as I mentioned before, how important it is to implement technology in, a syndication business, and by syndication business meaning pulling resources, typically it's capital together to go after. It doesn't even have to be real estate. It could be a technology company, but essentially it's a conglomerate of people who combine financial resources to acquire, whether it's a company or real estate in my case. So how does that help the people who are directing the ship, the operator, streamline their process with their investor communications?
Yeah. So really the big problem we see in this space is, historically capital, has been raised and sort of managed in very sort of piecemeal ad hoc ways. So, you had, you're tracking stuff in email, you're tracking stuff in Excel. And so you kind of have a hodgepodge of systems. And that's worked okay at a very limited scale, but you certainly at a very you very quickly run into the issue of credibility when you're starting to grow the operation among your investors, among your capital partners. So the point around this is the importance of actually having a very consolidated system where you're managing, again, incoming capital from investors, being able to report professionally to them, and then ultimately being able to pay out their distributions. It's just having that clean interface, that clean experience with your investors. That's ultimately what communicates well with your capital partners and investors. So that's the trend that we're seeing is, today investors are a lot more savvy. They're data hungry, and they're used to interacting with brokerage websites. They're used to interacting with these online platforms where they can see their portfolio at a glance. And so the whole point of it is, our mission on our side is bringing that same scale, that same professionalism as you would from a Charles Schwab-like experience, bringing that to the small business, to the entrepreneur, enabling them to scale across their network of investors.
Awesome. And so are there any particular features, and there's a couple of investment management software that are out there in general, particularly in the real estate multifamily business. I'm not going to name them on the show, but I guess what, sets Investnext apart from any competition that's out there?
Yeah, so we quickly realized when we went to market, what's very obvious is real estate is ultimately built by entrepreneurs, small to medium sized firms, people that are very tactical. They're going after a certain market, they're building their portfolio. And the issue we saw is that a lot of the tools out there are either non-industry specific, so you get some really complex systems that require a lot of configuration, a lot of time to actually implement, or they're just extremely expensive and they're built for the enterprise. So they're going after the real estate funds like Blackstone and the like. And of course, that from an operating standpoint, from an entrepreneur, small business, it's just not even reasonable. So your next best option is, well, I guess I'm just going to stick with, Excel and whatever back office tools I can to kind of handle all this. So the big point of difference here was we built a tool that enables these entrepreneurs to literally sign on, start their syndication from their very first syndication, and then scale the tool as their business grows. So that what that means is literally from a very kind of feature standpoint, it's access to a very nimble CRM where you can manage your investors, prospective investors. You have your deal rooms, you can set those up. You can, of course, you have that portal experience where you can communicate out to investors. Of course, so you raise the capital, and then of course, moving down the line, you say, you know what, now I'm actually going to be managing my investments in the system. So I'm going to plug in this module where I can manage my cap table, distributions, etc. So it's a very modular growth tool for those types of businesses.
Awesome. And when you're talking about real estate specifically and your platform, it's important to, as an operator, to always be in communication with your investors when it comes to, if you already bought an existing property, your distribution schedule and when do you expect payments to go out. And usually when there's a real estate syndication, there's an incentive for an operator to perform well above and beyond what usually is a preferred return that's paid, whether it's 8%, 10%, whatever that number is, and then there's a split after that. Does Investnext help the operator calculate that, what we call waterfall distribution as well, so they're not doing it themselves in Excel? And how accurate, is that?
Yep. Yes. Investnext handles all of that. Our philosophy is that everything that you've currently or previously done in Excel, you're going to import it all into Investnext, and then moving forward, you can set your waterfall schedules as you would. So it's a full drag and drop editor. You can look at your operating agreement and say, okay, yep, this is the schedule I have with my investors. You're designing that to start with, and then once that's in place, moving forward, depending on what your distribution schedule is, it's just pulling from that rule set. So then the calculation engine for your waterfalls lives in Investnext, which means downstream when you're reporting out to investors on their IRR, equity multiple, et cetera, that's all being pulled and reported from there. So it's all housed in Investnext.
Got it. That's really great because there are some platforms that don't track that for you. Could you talk a little bit about, how your platform works for operators? So, for example, if, let's just say my company wanted to come on board with Investnext, how does that work? Like, how many investors can you have in general on your portal or in your database? Obviously, deals are deal by deal specific. Is there any cap, or is there different subscription tiers towards different numbers of investors or deals? Like, how do you price out your software relative to the competition?
Yeah, so that was pretty key on the onset, right? We're not the type of company that has a heavy upfront implementation fee or any of that kind of sort of effect. The whole concept here is at whatever scale you find yourself at, you should be able to access the tool, start using it from day one. So it's really, we only look at volume of active investors that you're actively managing. So that means you can manage as many prospective investors on the platform. We really just look at that volume of active investors. So that is nice because, if you're a small kind of boutique shop, you're working with a handful of capital partners, investors, it's nice because it's a very minimal cost. And then, of course, as you're scaling to hundreds or even thousands of investors, then that price per investor is also grows with that, and it's actually scaled at that. So it works pretty nicely.
So for a newer operator that only has a handful of investors on a couple, they've done maybe one deal or two deal, this is a perfect, it sounds like it's a perfect start, and you kind of grow with the operator.
Exactly. So that's again, the concept here was keeping the subscription very manageable, very low cost to start with, because that's ultimately the whole point around this industry is that, again, a lot of businesses, they operate in a very lean budget, and that's the first problem to solve. The second problem is, again, being able to actually have access to quickly implemented tools, right? So when you sign on to a new system, it shouldn't feel like you have to have a whole team behind you to now help you implement this complex system. You have to do complex migrations. You have to potentially even have an outsourced IT team to help you integrate into different systems. The whole point of it is you should just be able to jump on the website, sign up for it, and start using the platform. That's what we're ultimately driving towards. It's just that very simplistic, fresh start, and then moving forward, you can, again, sign on to as many modules as you want.
Got it. Okay, perfect. And so outside of that, is there any, is Investnext through its own, you have its own website, can you integrate it on sponsors' websites where they have an investor portal page and then there's a sign on? Is there an integration for that as well?
Exactly. Yep. So that marries nicely to, if you're doing Squarespace or you're doing, WordPress or whatever website you're using, or even if you have an outsourced IT website provider, the whole point of it is it's universally linked across all websites. And of course, the branding on that portal experience is meant to match that seamlessly. So
that's awesome. Well, I'll definitely check it out. And do you think that your experience, like, did you, as a co-founder of this company, as more of a personal question, how did you, like, what's your role in growing this company? Did you come up with the code, or what really lights you up and gets you excited about the growth of this company? And what have you been focusing on to help you grow Investnext?
Yeah. So I'll kind of call back to, previous to Investnext, I was at Handshake, as you mentioned. So that to me was, back in the day, that was college. We were dorm room founded, and it was just a ragtag bunch of college students trying to build a product, go to market with it, trying to get in front of university career centers, trying to say, hey, we have a really awesome product here, getting shot down tons of times, working on the product, optimizing it, making it better to go to market. Anyways, heavily involved in product development. That was very sort of critical to kind of, what my passion is today, which is product development and building product. So that's carried over into Investnext. So today, that's my focus. I'm part of the development team. We're constantly optimizing the platform alongside our customers. And that's what it is. The platform has been built as a result of us collaborating with our customers. And it's been a close feedback loop from there, and organically from that point. So that's, it's been pretty exciting to be involved in that role.
That's awesome. So what does the next 5 years look like for Investnext? What are your goals with the company?
Yeah, so we're excited about really the concept of we have a really solid software package and built for this industry, but we're really excited around sort of this concept of a platform built around it. So one of the big problems we see in the space is access to sort of on-demand perhaps investment accounting resources, tax accounting, tax support, even, for instance, an example of being able to spin up a subscription agreement or an operating agreement legally verified. We see that always kind of being a bottleneck is, of course, you're working with your attorney and whatnot, and we're trying to create as much automation there where, in essence, if you have a deal coming up, the ability to spin that up, spin all the verified legal documents you need to get that going. If you're working with an existing attorney, of course, being able to collaborate on them in the platform. So building that sort of collaborative platform is what we're really excited about in the next few years here, and that's coming up very soon here.
That's awesome. So that kind of leads me to the end of the podcast in terms of our fire round. So usually we ask just a few quick questions, and number one would be, it sounds like you've been focusing a lot of time on Investnext. Do you have any other hobbies outside of growing the company?
Hobbies, I play a lot of guitar. So brief background on me, I'm actually born and raised in Spain. Been in the U.S. for most of my life now, but one of the things that I carried over, my family has a lot of kind of musical backgrounds, so I would say that's where I spend a lot of my hobby and my free time, just playing the instrument.
That's cool. Definitely a stress reliever.
Yeah.
And if you have a favorite business book, or real estate book, what would you say that is?
For me, one of my favorites, and I think it's probably been said many times over by many people, but one of my favorites is 7 Habits. I think it's the principles are kind of very universal, but I think for me, I first read that book when I was in college. It's kind of an aha moment, just sort of in kind of understanding what's important just on a day-to-day basis. So I think that was a good guiding kind of book that I always reference back to from a principle standpoint.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. That makes sense. And then lastly, if you said, if I had to ask you who your favorite, role model would be in your life, what would you say?
I have to say, probably sounds pretty cheesy, but it's probably my mom. I grew up, she was always a very hard worker, more in my personal life, but I grew up in a single child home. And so I saw her work really hard, trying to make sure I went to, got all my studies, did well in school. So I saw sort of just the grit that she had in raising me, and that's always been a strengthening kind of inflection point for me. So that's my role model in my life.
Awesome. Gotta love the moms. Well, great, Kevin. Well, how can people find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, so go to investnext.com, or you can just email me right at kevin@investnext.com. Usually pretty quick to respond.
Awesome. And what I'll be doing as well is posting a link to Investnext website in the comment section of this podcast, and also a link to Kevin's LinkedIn. Or if you want to reach out to Kevin, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll guide you in the right direction. But Kevin, great to have you here, and best of luck to Investnext, and hopefully our listeners got something out of this. It's very important to systematize that relationship, because once you have a deal, you're focused on executing the business plan. That's number one, and making sure you're a good fiduciary to not only yourself but your investors. So you got to make sure property management's in place. You got to make sure your leasing plan is in place, your construction plan is in place, and at the same time, you still have to keep your relations with your investor happy. So that's managing on-time distributions, managing deal updates every month. That's typically what I do. Managing financial reporting. If somebody asks for, an income statement, you want to be able to readily have that available for your investors. It's really important, and it allows you to free up time to do what you should be doing, which is executing on your business plan. So, really important and great stuff, Kevin. Appreciate you again coming on, and hope to have you back here in a year from now and see the growth of Investnext.
Likewise, Anthony. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thanks again, Kevin.